to their children. NewsNation on the ground in Ukraine as the war enters its second week. Plus, only on NewsNation.
Putin called me publicly a traitor. Called him a war criminal.
A KGB spy who went toe-to-toe with Vladimir Putin takes you inside the Russian president's mind as the invasion of Ukraine rages on. What he says is motivating Putin to press forward.
People who know him, they're afraid of him.
And should the U.S. send troops to fight Russia? NewsNation's brand new exclusive poll shows the country is united on what role America should play in its support of Ukraine. But a majority of Americans say there is a line in the sand we should not cross. I'm Nicole Verley. It is Wednesday, March 9th. This is NewsNation Rush Hour. We will bring you the very latest live from Ukraine in just a moment. But first, here are some stories we're watching here at home. As the cost of gas continues rising, Americans are really feeling the pressure on their wallets. This video shows, look at this, the lines outside of a free gas giveaway that even resulted in some reports of fights in the crowd. And with President Biden's executive order banning Russian oil imports, can the U.S. become energy independent? NewsNation examines the steps the countries could take to bring prices back down at the pump. And gas isn't the only necessity that's getting more and more expensive. Skyrocketing costs for wheat and flour means a lot of the food in your pantry is going to cost more, why some Americans actually say that's good for them. Plus, the invisible war being fought right here at home. U.S. officials warning Russian hackers are targeting critical infrastructure and urging companies to beef up their cybersecurity. Why one expert fears the hacking has really already started and just gone unnoticed. But first, let's get to the situation on the ground in Ukraine. Let's take a look at this map. Now, it shows the areas where Russian troops have already taken control. Those are the areas in red. Now, fighting today has been concentrated in Ukraine's southern region, with the city of Mariupol being the focus of today's bombing. NewsNation correspondent Robert Sherman joins us live from Ukraine. And Robert, we know a maternity hospital was hit today.
A maternity hospital was hit today, Nicole, and quite simply, some of the most gruesome images of this whole war are coming out of Mariupol tonight. We want to show you this video, which was posted to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's Twitter account. Pretty disturbing imagery. This is the inside of the hospital, and you see the cameraman walking around. Nurseries and hospital rooms are covered in rubble. You see the outside of the courtyard. There's just debris all over the place. The trees look completely unrecognizable. The president said that there were people who were trapped under that rubble, and local officials say 17 people were injured. This is what some of the victims look like. Look at some of these photos. You have a woman who was carried out of the hospital on a stretcher. She's a pregnant woman at that. You have another woman who you can see walking down the stairs under her own power, but her face is covered in blood. Just simply disturbing to look at. And the condemnation has been coming in pretty swiftly. I want to read you this from the deputy mayor of Mariupol. He said, quote, "We don't understand how it's possible in modern life to bomb a children's hospital. People cannot believe that it's true." The White House has gone so far as to call this barbaric. And we also want to show you this from UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He took to Twitter earlier today and said, quote, "There are few things more depraved than targeting the vulnerable and the defenseless." And you got to keep in mind, Nicole, that this is a city that has been besieged relentlessly for days on end. For the average Ukrainian living in Mariupol, they don't have water. They have a low supply of food. More than likely, they don't have power. We've heard this phrase, indiscriminate bombing, thrown around the past couple of days. It sounds like a very specific term. What it really means is bombing without regard for who's on the receiving end, who is in the line of fire. And if you weren't sure what that meant coming into today, you do now.
Robert, you are absolutely right. Those images are so disturbing. We will check back in with you later this hour. Thank you. Well, Vice President Kamala Harris heading to Eastern Europe, first stop Poland, on a mission to reinforce Western unity among the Russian invasion. But as White House correspondent Allison Harris tells us, the VP's trip comes at the same time a U.S. ally is catching the administration off guard, Allison.
Yeah, good evening, Nicole. The vice president just landed in Warsaw, Poland, stepping off the plane moments ago. She's there to continue to shore up strength among NATO allies and also thank Poland Poland for taking in the thousands of Ukrainians who are fleeing their country. But this comes at a really interesting time, as the U.S. has been blindsided by Poland's public announcement that it wants to send fighter jets to Ukraine via a U.S. military base in Germany. The Pentagon saying today, just moments ago at a press briefing, that this is too high risk and it would oppose any plan for a NATO nation to send fighter jets to Ukraine.
The intelligence community has assessed that the transfer of MiG-29s to Ukraine may be mistaken as escalatory and could result in a significant Russian reaction that might increase the prospects of a military escalation with NATO.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken is also addressing Poland's proposal in a press conference this afternoon, saying that he would want to make sure the planes were transferred to Ukraine in the right way, but not expanding on exactly what he means by that. Blinken and his British counterpart today calling for more countries to join the U.S., the U.K. and the European Union in imposing severe sanctions on Russia, like the U.S. ban the president announced yesterday on Russian energy imports. The U.K. and the EU committing to drive down its buying of Russian oil and gas throughout the rest of this year. The two leaders also begging for more nations to send more military support to Ukraine, as the UK today announced more anti-tank weapons being sent to Ukraine, as well as more air defense systems. Nicole?
All right, so Allison, what's the latest from the administration on whether the U.S. is putting a no-fly zone in place over Ukraine?
So nothing new on this today from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Blinken just reiterating that he still believes it is not a good idea to instate a no-fly zone over Ukraine. He believes that that would result in direct engagement with the Russians, that would actually escalate tensions. And as he says today, he believes that would lead to an even deadlier crisis in Ukraine. Nicole?
All right, Allison Harris in D.C., thank you. Well, there's some fresh fallout fears in Ukraine after the UN's nuclear watchdog says another nuclear power plant has gone offline. UN representatives say data transmitting from the Zaporizhzhia plant in southern Ukraine suddenly stopped, and that's the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe. That data drop-off coming just a day after the same type of interruption was reported at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. And a brand new exclusive NewsNation poll shows an overwhelming majority of Americans are increasingly concerned about a nuclear war. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joining us live again. So, Leland, what else is in that exclusive poll?
It really speaks to the uncertainty the American people feel right now. Asking about 1,000 voters, do you think, or how concerned are you that there would be a nuclear attack somewhere in the world within the next decade? Right now, as you look, 82% very somewhat concerned of an attack in the next decade. Vladimir Putin has threatened one 3 times in the past 3 weeks. So it shows you how the American people are responding to this. Now, it might also show a little bit of what we found in our next poll in terms of if economic sanctions do not stop Russia from taking military action in Ukraine, would you favor or oppose deploying United States troops into the conflict? 50% either strongly or somewhat oppose, only 35% strongly or somewhat favor. The administration certainly sees these numbers. That's what they're talking about when it comes to not having a no-fly zone. Specifically, the idea of committing any kind of U.S. forces puts the United States in a position of squaring off directly with Russia, either over the skies of Ukraine or on the ground in Ukraine. It is impossible almost to see how that does not escalate into something beyond simply shooting at each other with conventional weapons inside Ukraine, which brings us to what the American people are willing to do to stop Russian aggression in Ukraine. They're willing to pay a lot more at the gas pump. If stronger sanctions against Russia rise American gas prices but limit Russia's invasion of Ukraine, would you favor or oppose stronger sanctions? 65% of Americans say they are willing to pay more and endure the personal financial pain to try and punish Vladimir Putin. The real question, Nicole, going forward is, and you have to sort of get deeper into these numbers, which we will do later tonight on Balance with the pollster himself, is the key part of that question, but limit Russia's invasion. So far, nothing the administration has done has limited any of Vladimir Putin's aggressive acts. I think Robert Sherman made it very clear. If anything, Vladimir Putin is getting more and more brutal, more and more defiant. We'll ask the question tonight if the administration is too concerned with what might provoke Vladimir Putin rather than what might actually stop Vladimir Putin.
And Leland, before we let you go, I want to go back to that first topic. I mean, now with this new power plant offline, you know, the threat of it really, of some type of nuclear interaction, for lack of a better word, really does seem more real each day.
Well, certainly, and Vladimir Putin knows this. There's a reason that his forces shelled 2 nuclear power plants, and they've taken this data feed offline. He's threatened nuclear war. Now he gets the spoils of having a potential nuclear fallout without the costs, because he can hold this over Europe's head. If there is a nuclear event, shall we say, at any of these power plants, it will affect all of Europe. Who is in the balance of deciding how tough the world will be on Vladimir Putin? Europe. And you better believe that in the capitals around, especially in France and in Germany and in the United Kingdom, and more importantly, probably in Poland, Romania, and Slovakia, the NATO countries right closest to Ukraine, they're terrified of this prospect, and Vladimir Putin is going to exploit that.
Absolutely, and then the ripple effect, you know, affecting the rest of the world. All right, Leland Vitter, thank you as always. And Leland, as he said, we'll do a deep dive on this exclusive new poll tonight during On Balance at 7/6 Central. What else it reveals about America's attitude toward Russia's war in Ukraine. And breaking today, the Ukrainian government is now banning the export of key goods crucial for global food supplies to ensure, of course, that they can feed their own people amid this ongoing war. But that includes sugar, meat, and wheat. Ukraine and Russia are some of the top producers of wheat. Together, the two countries export close to 1/3 of the world's production. And as that war rages on, the prices of everyday staples like bread could cost more. In just the last month, wheat prices have jumped 70%. NewsNation's Nancy Liu is live for us. So, Nancy, this will potentially cause some major global export disruptions.
Absolutely, Nicole. While a lot of people focus on record high gas prices, many Americans focused on the soaring cost of wheat and flour, from major manufacturers to neighborhood bakeries to home chefs. The cost of baking pretty much anything costing more dough.
For businesses like Bread Bar here in LA, which provides baked goods for many restaurants and hotels, this is a staple. But flour is getting harder to come by due to shifting global demand. The price of wheat has jumped by 24% in just the past week.
It's the #1 ingredient that we use is wheat flour. And some of our very basic staple products. So when there's a short supply or there's disruptions in the supply chain, that gets felt by the bakers and ultimately by the consumer.
Rob McKee is CEO of the American Bakers Association, where members are facing more competition for American wheat flour. Russia and Ukraine usually produce 1/3 of the global supply, but the ongoing invasion has cut off their contributions.
There's just going to be more competition for American wheat. It's great for the wheat grower.
Like Doug Rebout in Appleton, Wisconsin, who has mixed feelings. His daughter was adopted from Ukraine in 2005.
I don't like being able to profit from despair in another country, but it is the way the global market works.
Now is the time that Ukrainian farmers would be planting their new wheat and grain crops, so the worldwide flour grab is expected to get even tighter.
A 50-pound bag, we used to get it $16, $17, now it's up to $21.
Already felt at this bagel shop in Las Vegas, to Bread Bar in LA, and this family shop in Wisconsin.
You know, when it comes down to it, you just have to turn that price around to the customers, you know, and you don't like to do it.
Now, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, before the Russian invasion, Ukraine was on track for a record year of wheat exports. Nicole?
All right, Nancy, thanks. Well, the Russian invasion could reach far beyond Ukraine and affect more than gas and wheat prices. There are growing concerns of a cybersecurity threat for all Americans. One of the most disruptive examples, of course, the Colonial Pipeline attack, where Russian-affiliated hackers took down the largest fuel pipeline in the entire country. Washington correspondent Evan Lambert is live in D.C. And Evan, you spoke with a cybersecurity expert. Should we be worried maybe that Russia has actually already started something's in the works and we just don't know about it?
Nicole, to be clear, we have not seen any major disruptive cyber attacks since Russia invaded Ukraine. We haven't seen that in the U.S., but those cybersecurity experts and government officials say it is not time to be complacent, and that is a very real risk. U.S. intelligence officials just briefing Congress this week on ongoing threats to our homeland, saying some of the most serious and direct include cyber attacks. China, they say, is the biggest cyber threat because it has the most resources. But of course, Russia also remains a concern, given the country sees cyber attacks as a military tool. The FBI and NSA director saying the U.S. could be collateral damage if Russia launches cyber attacks against Ukraine. As a refresher, the May 2021 Colonial Pipeline, which you mentioned, Nicole, ransomware attack. That ransomware attack shut down the major gasoline pipeline for the East Coast for several days, led to panic buying, and in some places, a temporary hike in gas prices. The FBI says a Russian hacking group, DarkSide, was behind that attack. According to Bloomberg, the night before Russia's attack on Ukraine, hackers gained access to computers connected to employees at more than a dozen natural gas-related companies, including Chevron. The motive still is not known. Chevron says it's following government advice to protect itself from cyber attacks. A cybersecurity expert telling NewsNation today Russia may be waiting for the right moment to launch wider cyber missions.
So I think they're probably keeping it in reserve until things escalate, and at such time they may take action on their objectives. But once they do that, then it's the cat's out of the bag. It will reveal where they have access, and right now they may have access in organizations that don't know that they're in there right now.
And Nicole, the U.S. still says there is no specific credible cyber threat against the homeland, but they are urging companies to keep up their defenses and to report any suspicious activity immediately to the FBI. Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. Have to stay on guard there. Evan, thanks. Well, since President Biden's ban on Russian oil and energy imports, a gas buddy analysis says because that was expected, prices will go up, but not as dramatically as they have. Last year, Russian oil imports were about 1% of total U.S. supply. In 2021, we imported almost 200,000 barrels of crude oil per day from Russia, but we drilled more than 11 million barrels per day. So the question is, can the U.S. sustain itself without those Russian imports? And NewsNation's Marky Martin is live for us with the details on that.
Hey, good afternoon, Nicole. A lot of experts say yes. Just behind me here and all across the country, today's national average for a gallon of gas, $4.25. And like you just said, it's a number that will likely go up. But, you know, the U.S. pulling the plug on Russian imports likely won't be that fatal blow to Putin that a lot of people would love to see. So now America has to figure out how and where to pivot for production.
Every single day, America uses 20 million barrels of oil. Until yesterday, nearly 700,000 of them were Russian. Energy is Russia's lifeline, its biggest industry and most powerful companies. Energy fuels its government. Despite the U.S. ban not being the death blow that a full European ban would deliver, it's another tool applying pressure. Now that gap needs to be filled.
People have been saying, yeah, Biden's going to talk to Venezuela, going to talk to Iran to make up for Russia, needs to go and visit the Saudis. And it's like, well, why doesn't he go to Canada?
Paul Sankey is an oil and gas equity research analyst. He thinks with the help of Canada, North America could easily be self-sufficient. He thinks for now, $100 a barrel is the new norm, predicting painfully high gas prices are only getting started.
When America produces their own energy, America is stronger and the world is safer.
Today, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy claiming California could support itself following the loss of Russian energy.
We could produce all we need in California that he's knocked away from Russia and be able to produce even more.
A geopolitical move for the greater good, but one that continues to hit Americans' wallets. To blunt the impact of the ban, Biden also releasing 30 million barrels from strategic oil reserves. That emergency crude oil is stored in underground salt caverns at 4 major facilities in Texas and Louisiana. Experts also calling on Americans to become more energy efficient and focus not only on supply, but take a harder look at their demand.
It's just America retains this view that we should be able to drive as big a truck as we want with cheap gasoline. And as long as you keep doing that, you know, you're probably going to have oil problems quite often.
You know, President Biden warning that defending freedom would cost. And just a little bit ago, Nicole, I got off the phone with one of my oil and gas sources here in Texas. He's in West Texas. He said the short answer is yes. America could cover this deficit, but it's going to require companies to up their production. He also added that the Keystone Pipeline would push more barrels of oil a day than what we import from Russia. Nicole.
All right, Mark U. Martin live for us in Dallas. Thank you. Still ahead on NewsNation Rush Hour, Kelly Myers sits down for an exclusive interview with a former KGB general, sharing personal information on what he remembers about a young Vladimir Putin in the Soviet Union and what he thinks may be Putin's ultimate goal. Now, a former KGB spy calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal and bringing us an inside the power dynamic surrounding Russia's president. President Putin was actually a subordinate of this former spy, one of hundreds of subordinates. And NewsNation's Kelly Myers is live for us in D.C. Kelly, you sat down with him.
Yeah, Nicole, a fascinating interview with Oleg Kalugin, who publicly sparred with Putin and feared for his own life after speaking out against the Soviet government. He had plenty of insight into the motives of the Russian leader as he continues his onslaught against Ukraine.
Rows of spy books fill the shelves in Oleg Kalugin's Maryland home. You wouldn't know Kalugin spent decades as spy master, running agents in the U.S. as a former KGB officer, becoming the youngest general in the history of the notorious Russian intelligence agency. That's where he first heard the name Vladimir Putin.
When I met him, he was just a nobody, you know. I remember in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, I was number 2 man, you know, and he would come to me and knock on the door. May I have documents signed? He would just give me something, I would sign it. That's all the experience I had with him. He was a nobody.
That nobody would later rise in the ranks of the KGB and turn on Kalugin. Putin called him a spy for the U.S., almost having him arrested, even killed, before Kalugin got asylum in the U.S. Kalugin grew critical of the KGB, denouncing the Soviet government.
Putin called me publicly a traitor. I publicly called him a war criminal.
Now the leader of Russia, Putin, is waging a war of his own making.
He said that the downfall of the USSR was the greatest, you know, catastrophe.
Familiar with his thinking, do you think he'll move beyond Ukraine?
Well, you never know. You know, Putin is unpredictable.
With his unique insight into the mind of the Russian leader, Kalugin says Putin is isolated and dangerous.
He is now running the country without any opposition. He took care of, of all the opposition leaders. They were either, poisoned or killed or exiled. And people who know him, they are afraid of him, you know.
As for what happens next, Kalugin won't put anything past Putin, not even threatening nuclear attack. He says what the West is doing is working, isolating Moscow from the rest of the world. But he warns Putin's main motivator is power, and he isn't slowing down.
His own choice is to stay as long as he can in power. He will stay for the rest of his life, unless something happens. You know, he will never give up, because he has no choice, and he knows he may be in trouble if he is. And he's I don't envy him. He's a lonely man, you know.
And despite Putin's goal to stay in power and grow his presence, Kalugin tells me he believes Putin's power-hungry mission against Ukraine will ultimately lead to his demise. Nicole?
All right, Kelly Meyer with that exclusive interview. Thank you. Still ahead on Rush Hour, a tale of two regions, eastern Ukraine being battered by Russian forces, while in the west, life continues almost like normal. Robert Sherman joins us live to show us the shocking disparities. And a look into life for Russians in the war. We talked to a Russian American who says his family back at home is under constant surveillance. Welcome back to News Nation Rush Hour. A tale of two cities, Kyiv and Lviv, both in Ukraine. Death and destruction in one, life goes on in the other. Relatively untouched by Russia's invasion as war rages on in the east. East versus west, completely different. Our correspondent Robert Sherman joins us live from Lviv. This is a story, Robert, we're only going to see on News Nation. And the difference between these two cities right now, it's striking. It's like night and day.
It's unbelievable to look at, Nicole. You have one sovereign nation effectively leading two separate existences. In the West, you have people trying to carry on as normal. To the East, you have people just trying to survive. In the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, life and death are potentially mere moments apart as bombs and missiles fall on the city. In Lviv, 7 hours to the west, life seems normal. Svetlana and Artem have experienced both in the last month.
Yeah, it's really different because previously we live in Kyiv, so we come here 2 weeks ago, I guess, and the main reason because it was really dangerous to stay in Kyiv.
Southern and eastern Ukrainian cities continue to bear the brunt of the Russian advance. Supermarkets in Novokhovka, which is currently occupied by Russian forces, have been cleared out, with strangled supply chains and sky-high demand for goods. In Lviv, a city that has received hundreds of thousands of refugees, demand for goods is high as well, but the supply chain is rock solid. Luba, a Lviv resident herself, acknowledges life is different since the invasion began, but she can't complain.
Yes, curfew and all those things make life inconvenient, but it's small change compared to war. The most important thing is people don't die and people don't bomb our cities. People need to return to their normal lives.
Out east, the focus is on day-to-day, moment-to-moment life. Fighting for survival, feeding one's family. Out west, people are looking at the big picture. Svetlana and Artem, for example, would like to go back to Kyiv as soon as possible, but they don't want the war to end at the cost of their independence. They're prepared to hold out for that.
I believe that our nationality is really strong, and our people have very big opportunities. So we need to win.
And we've seen some gruesome images come out of eastern Ukraine, Nicole. The people here in the West tell us that when they look at those images, it makes them want to continue fighting. It makes them want to not give in to the Russians and not surrender. Nicole?
All right. Robert Sherman live for us in Ukraine. Thank you for that. Such a disparity. Well, the war in Ukraine has gone on for 2 weeks now, possibly a bit longer than Putin expected. That's according to some experts. And average Russians are paying the price. For them, there are growing fears about less freedom and economic opportunity, and some are even thinking about leaving the country before it's too late. It's estimated that at least 5,000 Russians have been arrested in anti-war protests. Russians can't speak freely about the war online or out loud without fear of arrest. They're not even allowed to call it a war. Putin's edict is that it's strictly a, quote, special operation. On top of that, some Russians say they're starting to feel the sting of rejection from Western economic sanctions.
Life has been ruined dramatically. It is impossible to make any plans. Our savings are lost. We cannot use them. It's scary to even enter the shops. I have to search for a job, 3 or 4 working shifts.
How do you see your future?
My future? To relocate to another country, to be honest.
Already in another country is Ivan Cherniskudov.
People who are in Moscow, they go and protest, and kudos to them. I mean, they're heroes to the future of Russia.
Ivan and his wife were born in Russia, but now live in Indiana. They say right now, even staying in touch with family is a concern because messenger apps are tracked by the Russian government.
If you dare to say anything that is that disagrees with the main line of the Kremlin, At that point, you could go to jail, you could get beaten.
He says fears of further crackdowns on civil liberties, combined with a plummeting economy, are pushing more Russians to consider leaving for good.
Putin is destroying the future. That's the future. When you have people who are very well educated, who are very capable, very skilled, trying to, or even thinking about leaving the country, and they don't see a potential in the country that they're living in, that is destroying the future in effect.
But it's important to note some Russians are not as concerned as the Kremlin churns out propaganda characterizing Putin's invasion as a special operation to, quote, denazify Ukraine.
It's not a big deal. We've gotten through worse. We'll get through this also.
Whatever the outcome, Ivan hopes this conflict does not result in sweeping generalizations about his home country.
Not all Russians are the same, but just like not all the people are the same anywhere. I mean, there's different mentalities, there's different thinking in the United States.
Well, next to look at some other headlines here in America, including a Florida wildfire doubling in size in just 24 hours. Still ahead, why it's been so difficult to control and what's fueling those flames.